Hi, everyone. Today we have Maria, who is the founder of Value Lab, a consultancy that embeds expert product leadership into growing teams. And they work with some of the largest brands in Nordics and multiple scale ups across Europe. She is also the VP of product at Twice, a company that's raised more than $100 million in funding and is a leading analytics platform for optimizing the development and operations of lithium ion batteries. She has a PhD in economics, but has spent her career in tech companies building SaaS products specializing in data driven solutions like marketing analytics and industrial monitoring systems. She brings more than 15 years of experience in building products at various stages, whether it's 0 to 1, 1 to 10, or 10 to 100. And today we will be discussing how leading product teams and decision making changes across each of these stages of product building. So, Maria, thanks for taking out the time and being here. My first question is, at Supermetrics, you were leading product at a scaling stage company, while Twice was at pre product market fit when you started there. What is the difference in goal setting between working on product at these companies?
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you so much for having and inviting me. And getting back to the question about a 0 to 1 or pre-product market fit versus scaling, I think the difference is how you operate product in terms of the level of uncertainty that you have. Usually when you have a strong product market fit, one of the best indication of it is that you have a solid customer base, right? And usually, especially if it's right after company reach this product market fit, this customer base is very involved. So everyone is happy to provide feedback. Every customer has some ideas about what needs to be improved in the product to make their life even easier. So that sets you for this whole iterate and learn cycle, as some people call it, right? So you have a good, very good data set or a set of people you can speak with, and you can incrementally improve your product from there. When it comes to 0 to 1, the level of uncertainty is insane, right? You usually, meaning the fact that you don't have a product market fit means that you don't have too many customers, maybe a couple of people who tried it, maybe a couple of people who agreed to test something in early access, but still the signal that you get is very dispersed in a way, so you don't get that much ability to rely on your existing customers. And you need to find these signals that help you to figure out what would be the next things to build or how to shape your product moving forward from elsewhere, which kind of makes it a little bit different and maybe a bit more difficult, because I think the most theory behind product management was written and built about how you can scale when you have product market fit. And there is not that much available in terms of learnings and benchmarks and everything when it comes to pre-product market fit.
Got it. If you can give us some context about the problem statement the product was solving in each of these companies, that would be great.
Yeah. So basically, just to reiterate, we are talking about one of the most recent engagements that I have in terms of work when I was running product at Supermetrics. And this company, when I joined it, was there around for quite some time, even though in the early days it was a founder-led company, bootstrapping. So for the first 5 years of its existence, the team wasn't that large. But anyhow, when I joined the product itself had already quite a large customer base. And the problem statement behind this product was the one that a lot of people who deal with marketing data and try to optimize and analyze marketing campaigns have, that the data is actually scattered around a large amount of data sources. I think that the marketing data is probably one of the most fragmented data sets in the market still. Even though I've seen industrial data, I've been building industrial solutions. When it comes to marketing data, you need to bring your CRM, different marketing channels, together with email, together with what else you're using to acquire your customers. And that means that you need to somehow figure out how to align all these data sources and how to build the solid data pipelines before you actually kick off any analysis. And I think this problem doesn't go away with AI, for example. You still need to bring all these data points from all these different multiple places. And Supermetrics was a tool initially built by analysts who knew very well where the problem is coming from, and it helped people to actually connect different data sources to whatever analytics tool they use. That was a problem statement behind Supermetrics. And when it comes to Twice, it's a very different problem for very different group of customers, because we are talking about industrial hardware and industrial software in this case. And Twice helps companies to monitor and maintain big battery storage systems, which means that you have a lot of equipment that was shipped from multiple places, somewhere developed somewhere probably outside of your country. So there is some challenges with this equipment, its deployment, and then you need to figure out how to align all these multiple sensors that this equipment has and that tracks certain numbers, provides certain data points, and come up with a system that helps you to predict where the problem is, if something might go wrong in terms of safety or in terms of performance, or if some module went offline. So basically, the problem statement would be, as owner of this big industrial asset, how can I figure out how to run it in the cost-efficient, optimal, and safe way? With the help of software, of course.
Understood. So most companies at the end of the day have the same goal, right? Increase profits. But as a product lead, you kind of have to define goals that are key events up until the point where profit increases. So how do you define KPIs in a late stage company and an early stage company?
I think that increasing profit could be a bit of a debatable thing, especially if we are talking about tech companies. It might be more about revenue, right? But
Yeah.
anyhow, companies want to accomplish some sort of a business result. When it comes to pre-product market fit companies, what we are looking at is basically a sustainable growth motion, right? Something that justifies that further investment in this specific product or in this specific way of operating will actually scale moving forward. And the best indicators of it are usually conversion, right? Or win rate, depending on which type of a product you're working with. If it's PLG or ecom, you usually talk about conversion. If it's a sales-led motion, then you probably talk about win rate. But basically, whatever helps you to land next whatever number of customers you are after in the most efficient way should help. And then when we talk about scale, when we talk about product market fit and how you go from 10 to 100, how people usually describe this problem, we are talking and praying for such metric as net revenue retention. So you want your net revenue retention to stay positive, you want to keep the customers that you already have very, very happy. And you also want to win new customers on top of your existing customer base. So of course, there are more to it, there are input and output KPIs, but I think the best indicator of success is net revenue retention in this case.
Okay, so this may be a difficult question, but at what point does that transition happen? When do you realize that, okay, now instead of just finding product market fit, now we want like to focus on retention, or when do you change those KPIs?
I think there is no silver bullet or a formula that every single business can use. It's a little bit situational for the business, but I think it comes from the fact of how your business grows, right? Does it grow mainly from existing customer base? And then usually that means that this company is way beyond product market fit, and how they grow nowadays is just by selling something new or improving something for their existing customers. And then let's say that's like 70% of their revenue stream. And then when it comes to the pre-product market fit company, you see that you still need to win as many customers as possible to actually reach your revenue goals. And the new revenue is more or less the biggest contributor to whichever business you're developing. And I would say that when you're at this stage where you're like maybe 50% of your business is coming from existing customers and you still want to acquire 50, that's a very interesting motion that we call scale, right? So basically you have some already some ground to protect, some early wins, but you still want to get bigger.
Got it. And how does the role of a product lead differ in a pre-product market fit company versus a scale company?
I think that in a pre-product market fit, it's all about finding a product market fit. There is no other goal that you have. That's your day-to-day job to figure out what would be this thing that will create this scalable and repetitive growth for your company. And when it comes to after product market fit, then you need to actually introduce a lot of processes. You need to think that there is a whole space you need to protect to build a moat around. So how do we make sure that we defend the position that we already have while continuing growing, while continuing developing it further? In pre-product market fit stage, when it comes to processes, you might cut a lot of corners, right? You might be shipping products, experimenting, reverting things back. But the bigger your customer base gets, the stronger is your product market fit, the more cautious you need to become, and the more important it is to understand how to scale support function, operation functions, and things like that.
And how do you give structure to your day between these two company sizes? In a scale company, you said you already have processes. You introduce more processes, which means there's more consistency in the day-to-day structure. Is it possible to have a good structure in a pre-product market fit company as a
I
product
think
lead?
it's always great to have some structure. And of course, in terms of number of alignments, number of processes you have, it's way less. But you need to be, especially if you want to be successful with pursuing of this product market fit motion, all in all, you need to be very determined regarding goals and how does a good life look like. So spending some time on alignment with whoever you're working with, your development team, your founders, and so on. What exactly would be the next thing that we are doing and how do we evaluate it in terms of success? That's something that you need to invest a lot of your time into, I would say. And the other part is, of course, when it comes to pre-product market fit situation, basically the best predictor of your success and the best predictor of how fast you get into product market fit state would be the number of customer interactions or prospect interactions or user interactions that you have. So basically, I would say that in pre-product market fit, the proportion of the time that goes into some sort of a customer engagement should be way higher. Would it be like just a usability interview or you are shadowing a sales call or whatever, but you need to spend significant proportion of your time interacting with real customers and trying to understand what they talk about and how they talk about it.
If we can dive deeper into building a product at pre-product market fit, at Twice, what was the process like for you in building the product and getting the first version out there?
So I think that Twice the situation was quite special because Twice is a company founded by scientists and people with a lot of knowledge and a lot of expertise when it comes to all things batteries and energy. And I think that what happens in these companies that are actually kind of tech first, right? Technology first, is that people know really well how to build this bleeding edge algorithm, advanced technology, and things like that. But then the question is, how do we build this bridge between the technology and the real user? So when I joined Twice, we had plenty of algorithms that were capable of predicting based on data very important events for whoever manages the storage, and also providing quite like a strong insight into how the things will develop in the future. So some sort of like a predictive maintenance. But it all was a collection of notebooks. So there was a lot of data, a lot of insight, but there was no way for us to surface it in a convenient way for the people who've been using us. So, and this is where I think that's actually something that is way harder to do without product team compared to the fact when company invests a little bit in hiring product managers and designers, is to figure out how to bridge this gap between technology and the actual usage, because product market fit means repetitive usage and that people get value from whatever you provide every day in a convenient way. And of course, the bigger the value, the more hoops they are ready to jump with to get there. But in the worst case scenario, we need to decrease the number of hoops they jump through, right? Decrease the number of barriers we put in front of them in that sense. And in case of Twice, the biggest challenge, the mission the product team was on was to figure out how we can bridge this gap between amazing insights and the day-to-day of our customers. So what we started to do, we started to invest in figuring out the customer journeys. I remember putting engineers in a room and forcing them like, hey, just write a narrative describing day-to-day of our user. So you understand a little bit better at which level do we need to surface which insight, what is good enough, what is overkill for this specific customer challenge and this specific customer problem. So again, I don't think I have a better recipe or silver bullet than just go and speak with customers and spend as much time with customers as possible, but always think about their day-to-day, their challenges, and how these people operate.
And how did you approach the first customer you ever spoke to when you were figuring out what the product should be like? Was that intimidating? Did they respond well?
I think if people have a pain It's never intimidating. Everyone is happy to talk about some big problem that they have in their life, especially if you promise to make an effort and figure out how to solve it. So I haven't seen anything intimidating. It is always funny to understand how people actually react to your questions and how some of the assumptions that you made in advance might face the reality and turn out to be completely different. And it usually comes from all the perceptions that we have on what would be the biggest pain for the customer. So I can give you a specific example. We've been running one of these customer interviews in the early stages with the person, and we've been trying to understand what would be the thing that we need to spend more time, what we need to invest in, whether we want to build a forecast on how your equipment, and everyone knows that batteries degrade, right, over time. So how your equipment needs to be swapped or changed in the future because of this whole degradation process. Or should we invest more time in the next quarter figuring out how to orchestrate predictive maintenance and how to help our customers to identify the immediate issues with the whole storage? And there was an assumption in the team that we need to spend more time on this whole predictive thing, because if you put the ROI of it, right? So swapping your equipment, changing your equipment, predicting when you need to renew and change some batteries is actually financially just a bigger process with a higher risk, and people invest a lot into that. And when you take day to day, right, each daily operation doesn't cost you that much. So there was this initial assumption we need to invest into what matters for the customer financially more, let's go there. But when we spoke to customers, they were like, yeah, you know what, I have so many problems right now that I don't even have time, mental capacity to care about what happens 2 years from now. And that was
Right.
a very strong insight from the customer straight on the interview regarding how our assumptions are not maybe exactly right and what customers exactly want from us.
So a lot of times I feel like customers don't necessarily recognize their pain points. They might know something's wrong or they want improved efficiency somewhere. And when you talk to customers, they can't always tell you that this is the problem I want solved. So do you think you need to play the role of a consultant a lot of times, that you from the outside you try to understand their processes and then bring to their attention the area where they need a solution?
I think it's just a question of what do you ask them about, right? So whenever we talk with customers and we ask them, what do you think is the most important? They might be biased and they might not give you the exact information you're after. But as soon as you shift this conversation and frame it around their day-to-day, what they do, what was the biggest challenge over last 90 days? What was the biggest fire they had to put down? So you're actually starting to look for some facts, some events that actually happened in their life. Then you get a lot of insights from the customer. So I think that people who are not necessarily trained in user research, customer research, and all these theories behind it, they repeat the same mistake over and over. I've seen it a lot from early founders, like early stage company founders, when they come to customers and they say like, oh, what do you want us to build next? And then you get a very, very random brief about what do they want you to build next based on the recency bias or whatever was the nice LinkedIn post that they've been browsing through this morning. And this is where I think what you just mentioned happens, that customers don't know what they want. In that sense, yes, they cannot frame it from that perspective and answer directly to a question, what do you want? But as soon as you start asking them about the experiences, you can actually learn quite a lot about what would be helpful for them.
So you think user interviews is a skill that you learn over time?
I think that there is certain theory behind it, how to frame the questions, and it's been there for ages, I think at least since this last century, right? In terms of how to frame questions in an unbiased way, how to get the information that would be actually useful and as close to reality as possible from people. And I would say that that's the theory first that you need to know, just to understand how to put the words together in a way that you get the right information from the customer. And on the skill side, the more you do it, the better you are to come up with these framings on the go. So the rest you need to prepare for those interviews and things like that. But that's definitely something you need to think of. It doesn't come naturally without reading through some theory on what is the right way of interviewing people and interviewing customers.
Got it. What was the team structure like at Twice? You said there were a lot of scientists. Did you have to balance that team? across the software, reaching out to customers and such?
Yeah. The initial motion was, let's get very, very smart people who know a lot about the subject and a subject matter experts. And over time, we realized that to bridge this gap between the insight and the actual day-to-day application of this insight, we actually need to invest more into software and hiring some really strong product designers as well to help shaping those customer journeys, and product managers.
And what was the process like in creating the roadmap for the product, and how much of it was actually put into production?
Well, that's actually a super, super great question. And I'm glad that you're asking it, because we need to touch the whole roadmap process when it comes to pre-product market fit company. And my strong opinion there is that you shouldn't have any timeline based roadmap for that stage, because it doesn't make sense to plan for 12 months in advance, sometimes even for 6 months in advance, because that actually creates this motion when team is locked with something that doesn't make sense to improve or build any further. So when we are in a pre-product market fit stage, we need to look at our plans as a set of experiments. And therefore, it is more valuable, for example, to use such roadmap frameworks as now, next, later, rather than timeline based. So basically, we decide where we invest now. We decide what would be the exit criteria. So let's say we will build this functionality or this feature. What will happen when we deliver it, and how do we evaluate the results, and when we say that it makes sense to double down on something that we built there, or when we say that it makes sense to sunset it and move forward and build something different, right? So in that sense, the roadmap is just a set of ideas and bets, and you take it depending on the capacity of the team, one by one, or maybe three at a time, and you try to figure out how those experiments actually land in terms of customer reaction and customer interaction, and then you move forward. And you can have a huge backlog of ideas, because usually in the early stage, everyone in the company has some idea for some improvement. You need to figure out how to evaluate those ideas in terms of impact on the business, in terms of potential revenue contributions and things like that, and then run those experiments continuously. Ideally, also, you should constrain it in terms of a timeline, so one experiment doesn't kill your entire investment round, right, in terms of money. So you probably want to say, like, okay, I can run an experiment and try to build something for months, and then get customer validation and feedback on that feature for another month, and then be done with that. So there is a timeline component to it, but that's definitely not a sequence of features put on some sort of like yearly cadence, one right and another, because that doesn't allow people to pivot fast enough, in my opinion.
Right. So the timeline should be focused on the experiments. Like, this is what I want to figure out, and this is how much time I can give myself to
Yeah.
figure that out.
I think it was like ages ago, there was a company called Basecamp, and they had a handbook describing how they build their stuff. And they were saying that you always need to constrain scope and time in order to actually move fast. And I think, though it was something that they surfaced maybe 10 years ago, that still holds true. So yes, that's a set of experiments that you run, and you want to constrain them on both scope and time to make sure that you move quick enough.
Would you be able to dive deep into one of the experiments at Twice that led to either a sunset or doubling down, that gave you that information to move on?
Basically, everything that we build as an experiment. So we try to come up with whatever it is, a happy path or a minimal viable product. People call it differently, but basically the smallest amount of functionality that we can deliver to still make it valuable, and see how customers react on that. So one of the more successful features Twice probably has launched is our availability tracking, that helps customers to understand the available energy they can deliver for the storage. And that was a huge success. And we first just created this in a way that, hey, this is what happens currently on a daily basis. And then we figured out that that's super valuable. And we introduced a timeline so customers can now see it over time. What is the development? What is the dynamics for the last 90 days, for example, and making it better. in terms of which equipment actually creates a problem with availability issues and how to fix it, and they can observe it over time. So that would be one very successful feature that we launched. And as I said, we started with like a really small scope and a happy pass, and then we figured out how to scale it from there. In terms of sunsetting, there are a number of things that we've done and they haven't received that much traction on the market. So we tried to either pivot from it and do it in a very, very different way or actually sunset it. I think one interesting case would be the pivot when it comes to safety evaluation. I think the initial solution where we tried to predict problems with equipment that might create implications for the safety. So you know that even when you fly in an airplane, people sometimes tell you about batteries getting on fire and asking to preserve your batteries in a certain way. So that's not a secret. Sometimes batteries might go on fire, and that is called safety event. And the initial way we developed this feature for the customers was just too complex for them. We took too many factors in. We did probably the most sophisticated trend analytics on the market. And when we were presenting, it was really hard for the end user, especially if they don't have, like, I don't know, 80 years of data science experience and PhD in some chemical engineering to make sense out of it. We quickly realized that the most simplistic solution based on events would be better. We also talked to customers a lot. We asked them what are the tools that they're relying on when it comes to the safety incident monitoring and prevention of safety incident. A lot of them mentioned very basic data logging, data tracking tools, and we just looked at how it is done there, are these tools presenting, and we borrowed few of the workflows. And the next iteration was way much better.
How do you define the success of an experiment? Is there a statistically a significant number of customers that you have to show it to that like it before you say this is something we should definitely add to the roadmap and keep in the long run?
That's another great question, because when it comes to pre-product market fit, you usually don't have a luxury of running like statistical experiments, especially if you're building in enterprise software or any SaaS solution targeting big enterprise corporations, right? I was working in e-com as well and in B2C, where you have all this luxury of just running A/B test and comparing treatment and control and figuring out what works better with a solid data behind it. Here you need to rely on less, I would say, definitive signals when it comes to the evaluation of the product success. And it is usually numbers like win rate. So let's say you are introducing something and you see that people who get the pitch with this feature or have used this feature during the trial, they convert better. So the win rate would be a good indicator of the success. And the other part is, of course, the repetitive usage, right? So, for example, if you deploy something new and you see that customers actually, on a span of whatever is a reasonable time, like 2 weeks, 4 weeks, depends a little bit on the actual use case, right? They come back and they use this report, this insight, or this feature for the second time. That's a good indication that this product actually, or this feature actually worth investing further into and doubling down.
Yeah, repetitive usage is a great metric because pre-product market fit for B2B, you sometimes maybe only have one customer, if at all.
Yeah,
Uh,
or 2 or 3, right? And then how would you actually run something like a comparative A/B test with that number of customers? That's impossible. But you can track their usage. You can use all this amazing software that helps you to monitor user sessions, and from there you can derive quite a lot. And of course, if they pay, that's the best justification, right? So if you say like, all right, that was an early access feature, but now we want to add a little bit more money to your license fee because this feature will be available for you for the next, whatever, 12 months. And you see if there is a conversion or a win for that deal. That's also a great indication.
so that leads me to my next question. How do you figure out pricing when you just enter the market?
Okay, that's probably a topic for another podcast because we will not be able to cover all the theory here, right? But that's one of my favorite topics actually, because that's where my PhD is from, pricing. And there are quite a lot of theory around it. I will not get there. But basically, what you need to think about is the relative preference of whatever you are offering to a customer. So, is it something that makes their life drastically better in a repetitive way? So, basically, there's few things that I do in my life, maybe on like 5-year basis, for example, buying a car. So even though if something improves that experience, I only need it once in 5 years. But there are things that I do every day, right? So that's something that points to the relative preference. So you need to have some frequency of the use case for that, and you need some customer value. And the other part is a willingness to pay, right? So what would be the subjective perception from the customer side? What would be the reasonable, fair amount of money that they want to invest into solving this problem? And it really depends. And you only can figure it out by actually talking or surveying a group of customers, right? Because we don't know, like just a random example from outside of the scope of our conversation, we don't know what is the cost of production of like all these new dietary treatments like Ozempic or similar, but we know that people are willing to pay crazy money for it because it helps them to look better, to lose weight without effort, and yada yada yada. So that's an example of like extreme willingness to pay. And then there are some things that people are not that willing to spend their money on. And when we are trying to build something for a specific customer problem, when we define this problem, when we define the customer or ideal customer profile, the next step for us would be to understand, is there a willingness to pay? Does this problem create enough pain for the customer, psychologically, monetary, whichever other way, that they actually want to invest their own money into solving it?
And at what point in Twice did you realize that you had product market fit? Was there a single moment or a certain number of experiments that were a success?
I think we started to actually be very confident about it when we noticed that customers bring more business to us. So let's say you build something that customers really like and improve their day-to-day operations with. In our case, it was this whole availability tracking. But then you see that they actually call back to you and they say like, hey, I now want to connect more storages and I want to cover more storages with your software. That means that we made something that they want to actually scale their business with. And that's a great indication of a product market fit.
So feature requests from your existing customers.
Not necessarily feature request, expansion deals, right? So
Okay.
it could be feature request is also great because that means that they're using the product, they're thinking about it, and it's one of these indicators. But I would say that it's not 100%. As someone who actually coaches product managers and works with product managers, if person comes to me and says like, hey Maria, we have a lot of feature requests, that means we have a product market fit, I wouldn't immediately use this as an indicator. But if they tell me like, hey Maria, there were 5 expansion deals over last quarter and customers actually brought us plus 50% of their business, I would say, yeah, we have product market fit. Great. Let's figure out what to do next.
So now if we take the conversation to a bigger company like Supermetrics, what was the team structure like over there compared to at Twice?
It was way bigger team in terms of number of developers. And we need to say that I'm not sure how it is right now there, but when I was there, it was like pre-AI era. So teams all in all tend to be larger when it comes to the number of developers working on a problem. We had different product areas. So there was team in charge of all the data collection and figuring out how to properly connect with different data source APIs. There was a team figuring out how to improve the experience of customer on the other side. So when it comes to destinations, and there was teams helping with all other things like infrastructure, payments, licensing, things like that. So there were way bigger scope, I would say, and the scope was divided into different areas of responsibility. Yeah, so I think the biggest difference comes from the scale of it, right? And how do you make sure that when you have 20, 25 people just running product, how to ensure that they are aligned and they're still moving as one big org aligned by one big goal? That was a big challenge there.
And is there a difference in your personal management philosophy between managing a team, a smaller team, pre-product market fit versus at scale with so many developers?
Philosophy-wise, I think there is a big difference, but something that people should expect, that the larger the scale of a company, the more rules you have to follow and the less rules you can bend. And sometimes some things feel unnecessary or extra reporting step, but actually what helps everyone to be aligned, and that is actually necessary to invest into. It's about, right, like when everyone sits in the same room and it's a small team, the context is usually in the air and everyone shares it. But as soon as team is, for example, located in multiple regions, multiple offices, or multiple time zones, you need to make extra step and go extra mile to record everything, to keep documentation. So this whole context is not in the air anymore, but somewhere where everyone can access it.
Got it. And at Supermetrics, there was a point where the company decided we need to build another product to go up market, right? Or some new feature. What is something that you have to take into account in building a new product at an existing company with an existing customer base? Something that doesn't come up at all in building a new company from scratch.
Yeah, so basically you already have an established customer journey, right? And established perception around your product, and sometimes even muscle memory, if this is something that customers use every day when it comes to user experience. And those things are very crucial. So as we discussed previously, the one big number you go after is your net revenue retention, and you always want to keep it positive. So whatever you introduce needs to be introduced in a way that doesn't affect revenue retention negatively. And that means that you need to be very cautious. You need to know your customer journey really well in order to understand how to bring all these new features and capabilities in a way that actually helps customer with their existing tasks and brings it to the next level at the same time. So it's not an easy task, to be honest, when you already have a strong product market fit and a loyal customer base, to introduce something new to them.
Okay, so now I have some general product leadership questions. What would you say is the hardest part about your job?
I think the hardest part about product management is to figure out how to balance and bring together two things: customer value, so making sure that you build products that customers really love, and business value, how to ensure that the products customers love actually delivers the right motion for the business when it comes to growth.
So the difference between somebody liking the tech versus making the business grow, is that what you mean?
Not necessarily. It comes in many shapes and ways, to be honest. And I think one which we can discuss more because it's quite relevant with all this AI development is that some products, they have a huge customer value, but they also carry a huge cost factor when it comes to compute, when it comes to the ways it handles data. And you might end up in a situation that customers really value this product, customers can benefit from it quite far when it comes to the impact on their business, but the cost of delivering whatever feature you're building or insight you're building might be too high. And that's an interesting dilemma for product manager to address. So how can I figure out what would be the product that actually helps customers, but still make it in a way that it's profitable, or at least not net negative for the business. And there might be other dilemmas like that, right? So one thing, you want to build something that customers really engage on with and love. And on the other hand, you need to ensure that this feature actually drives the business forward as well.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think most AI startups right now are facing that problem. We at Artus are facing that problem for sure. Just trying to figure out how do we provide the value, because a lot of people want to use the tool, but then it's just like it's so expensive to deliver that. And if we increase the cost, then it'll become inaccessible to most users.
Exactly. And I think that is interesting new thing for us, because as people who work in tech, because we were living for like last 10 years in reality when the cost of software was nearly equal to zero, right? So next incremental user doesn't bring you next incremental amount of cost of spending, but now it changes. And we had this discussion in early days with Twice, because actually equipment monitoring, when it comes to the number of sensors that you're working with, is quite expensive thing, right? You have all these things in real time, tracking temperature, tracking voltage, tracking whatever, and then you need to collect all these data points, put it into cloud and process it there. And all of a sudden you come and say like, hey guys, you need to pay a 60 number to monitor your storage. And they were surprised, like, where does it come from? Like, my usual software fees, I don't know, like 20 euros a year per seat, and you're asking such a crazy price. And it took some time to actually explain where the cost is coming from and why it is so important to invest in this software and basically working with this willingness to pay. And I think with a lot of AI tools, people still, when they think about it, they treat it as a software with zero cost underneath. But we know that compute actually is not coming for free. And at some point, we need to charge our users some money for the compute and actually shift this cost towards the user as well. And that will be a very interesting motion for this industry to address.
Do you think customers are getting more accustomed to that?
I think little by little, yes, but I think that we are still not there. And of course, it's all about value, right? If customers get an experience, next level experience with your product, with your software, or with your AI algorithm, and actually like 100x improvement in their life and their work, then they will probably figure out how to find the money for it.
Got it. So one of the other hard things about product management is aligning stakeholders across teams. Every team has their own tool stack. Every team leader has their own priorities. How do you approach difficult conversations with various stakeholders?
I think the most important part there would be to find where we all aligned. It usually, even though this tech stacks or whatever, like day-to-day tactical intentions might be different, the end goal is clear for the whole org, right? We want to grow the revenue, we want to stay profitable, we want to grow our business. And then the most important part is to have the shared definition of what does the good look like for us at any given time. And if that is aligned, the rest is way easier, right? So of course, like let's say there is someone, account manager or whichever title they have, in charge of a specific customer, and they want to make their life the best. And for them, it's really important to make sure that all the requests from this customer are taken with the first priority. But we also know that it's not feasible to take every single customer with the first priority. You need to prioritize at some point. So it's really important for product managers to explain to people who bring in all these requests, what is decision making here? Like, hey, we decided not to build this specific feature because even though it's valuable for this customer, that would be a little bit of a side track for other 50 customers that we want to deliver value. And that's how I evaluated it. And that's what was the decision-making process behind it. So people can actually incorporate it into their thinking as well. And maybe they can even get to the customer and say like, hey, look, we know that you really want this improvement and it's really important for you. We prioritize something else, but that's how we address your issue moving forward. So being in the same boat, I would say, is very important when it comes to stakeholder alignment and have a shared understanding of what does good like.
Got it. And how has AI changed your job function?
I think AI actually is a game changer for product and product design in terms of the efficiency gains. And that's the first time in my career, at least, when we have things and tools that help us to work with unstructured data. We touched a little bit the topic of A/B testing and data later on, right? And it was always the case that whoever works with B2C products and larger customer base, they have data points and it's quite easy for them to steer the process around product decision making with data points and with some reliable hard sort of data. And for those who work in B2B with smaller customer base, it was a lot about taste and judgment. But now we have tools that can actually help us to surface insights from unstructured data in a better way, right? And you can do analysis across the pile of customer interview notes and do all these things. So that's one thing that AI immediately proved, I would say, like even like since 2 or 3 years ago, that it helps whoever works on customer insights to work with unstructured data in a better way. The other thing is, of course, the whole speed of development is next level nowadays, right? So the experiments become more cost efficient in the sense that you don't have to overinvest in development. You can build things on the go. You can even wipe code fewer of the solutions. And that means that you can do more experiments, which is great because then you can actually drive the innovation faster. So I think that actually like a huge change for product teams as well, the speed of development and the fact that you can now iterate, prototype and build ready-made solutions even faster. Yeah, all in all, I think that AI just makes product management work day to day way much more efficient and product judgment way much more sharp.
And what is something AI can't yet do that you'd like it to?
Well, there's so many challenges I want to put in front of AI to improve the daily life of different people. I think one of the things that AI is not very capable of is still when it comes to taste, right? So basically trying to come up with something drastically different on the look and feel side, and maybe at some point it will be as creative as humans, but nowadays it's not still the thing for us.
Do you believe people can vibe code their way to $1 billion software company?
Very cool question. When we talk about 1 billion, do we talk about valuation or revenue?
That's a good question. Let's say valuation.
I think valuation, possibly yes. When it comes to revenue, I would be more skeptical about it because I think that when it comes to vibe coding, and again, depends on how we define vibe coding in that case, right? Like being it non-developers with the help of LLM building software, or being it really experienced developers with the help of LLMs getting faster with building software. I think the issue with a lot of vibe coded solutions right now is that they're not ready to handle the load of many customers. There are some performance issues, some security issues, all sort of issues that are usually happening to vibe coding solutions, not because LLMs are not capable of producing secure and reliable code, but because people who are designing those vibe coding solutions are not necessarily aware of how to prompt it and on the system engineering and system design side what to do. So to guide this vibe coding solution. And therefore, I think that for these vibe coding solutions to become $1 billion in revenue, you still need some expert on top to actually reevaluate the system design that LLM had put into and make sure that it actually designed for scale.
Right. So a lot of vibe coders that come from a non-technical background may not even be aware of some of the problems they have to solve. So they can't really instruct the LLM to do it.
Yeah. So I can give you an example. I currently help one tech scale up here in Europe to build an AI native solution, and we really wanted to be as fast as possible. So our early access prototype was built by product manager, and we decided not to involve any engineers. And the first thing we figured as soon as we deployed it, that it's crazily slow. And when we started to look at why it is crazily slow and why customer needs to wait for, I don't know, up to 5 minutes to get a first result, we figured out that there was this essential data aggregation step that this vibe coding solution was doing on a client side, which took ages. And of course, like any strong system engineer, a person with some years in software development would say, oh yeah, please bring this whole data aggregation on the backend, do it there, then your solution will be faster. But to know about this whole system design aspects, you need to have some experience. And this is where I think that like a lot of vibe coding tools still need a little bit of a fine tuning from experts.
That's a really good example. So my last question is, so many people are building vibe coded products now. What is one advice you would give them in order to make that product an actual business, something that helps them go from something they built in 3 hours but have 0 users, 0 revenue, to something that's sustainable?
I think the most important part is to get your solution. I wouldn't call it product, I would call it solution, because for a solution to become a product, you actually need some market, right? Some monetization motion and things like that. But get your solution in front of customers. You can vibe code a brilliant thing and you like it and it's brilliantly designed and there's some workflows and you invest into making it better and better and better, but actually make sure that you dedicate enough time prospecting, reaching out to people who can potentially use your solution and making sure that it's not just you who is making the judgment if it's a great one or not, but you actually have this early access pool, a pool of people who are testing it in early access. That's an essential component for the success.
Understood. Well, Maria, this was so insightful. I think there's going to be so much value for all the builders, vibe coding products and trying to vibe coding solutions and try to make it into a viable product. And I think they're going to learn so much from this episode. So thank you so much for your time. It was great having you here.
Thank you so much for having me, and I was happy to share what I know.